And there we go, right on cue. So just to be aware of that, a number of people are going to listen to the recording after. This is also round one of things, so there'll be further conversations going on. But thanks for joining us. My name is Cam Preeb, Provincial Director of MBCM, and great to have you with us. Maybe as we get going, I'd love to just open with a word of prayer, and then I'll do some introductions, and our review team will take it from there, if that's all right. So let's begin with prayer. God, thank you for this day that you've created. Thank you for the rain, the moisture that continues to be needed. Lord, we're grateful for our many churches around the province, many various things going on tonight, whether it be kids clubs or other council meetings or just activities. God, would you bless them, those individuals and those leaders and those groups, that as they gather tonight, they might experience your presence with them. Lord, we pray that for us as well, that we would together experience your spirit at work. God, as we talk through the Constitution, the ways of how we live out this relationship together, would you guide our thinking? Would you help us to listen well to one another? And may all of this be done so that you would be glorified, your name would be praised. And so we're grateful for each one here. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so hopefully you have had a chance to glance over the documents, but I'll just take a moment to point out a couple of things. I'll ask Wamba to place in the chat when he's able. I'll ask him to in the chat put the link to the website, which does have all the documents available. We'll be referring to those throughout the evening, and you can see it there. I think he's just placed it there. And one of the things that's what brings us to this point is a number of things. 2008 was the last time our Constitution was updated, and so it's time to do some work in that regard. The other thing is, over the last couple of years, as provinces, we had together decided to work towards the collaborative model on a national level, and so CCMBC redid their bylaws in 2020 at their convention, and so this brings us each as provinces to a point as well. There's some things that we can adjust to line up well with that collaborative model that we've leaned into. And so because of since 2008, there's some changes that could be made because of those alignment with CCMBC. It was a good time for us to get to work on this. The board in this past April, tasked this Constitution review team with the initial work of going through the documents and putting together the adjustments and putting together this first draft. But certainly now it's at the stage where we want to hear from our churches. We want to hear from you as you have questions, suggestions, comments along the way. This is important that this happens, and so this is step one in that stage of the process. So we're going to do our best to work our way through these summary of changes and so on, and highlight things along the way, and look forward to some times of small group where we will have some times for Q&A there. But let me introduce the Constitution Review team so that you're aware of who they are, and also just be able to appreciate the good work that they've done since last spring when they started working on this. And the team is made up, so Amanda Layton and myself, as a part of MBCM staff, we're doing what we can to assist and resource and provide info along the way. But the team has been made up of David Weeb. David Weeb is a member at Westwood, as well as the MBCM board rep on this particular team. Marvin Dyke. Marvin's somewhat recently retired from Crossroads, and certainly Marvin's longtime leadership within the conference, as well as his background as a lawyer, is significant in this process as well. And Kelsey Friesen. Kelsey Friesen's a member of Fort Garry, as she's the assistant moderator there as well, and we've appreciated her gifts contributing to this organizational task here. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to Kelsey for the moment. She's going to lead you through some of the changes, but along the way, this team will go about doing their best to answer questions and provide responses as they come up, and we'll go from there if that's sounds all right. If along the way you do have we'll try to have some intentional times when there's some question and answer along the way, as well as some breakouts. So just so that you're aware of that. So Kelsey, take it away here if you would.
Thanks, Cam. So the way that we're going to go through this this evening is we've broken up the articles into 3 sections. There are a few articles at the end, I believe numbers 14 through 16 in what we're referring to as the new Constitution, which new and old is just our way of referring easily to the 2 different constitutions, the draft and the current one. And so there's a few at the end that we won't be getting to because they have other work that needs to be done, and so we're not going to discuss those tonight. So we have grouped the rest into 3 sections, and what we're going to do is I'm going to go through, hopefully you had time to read through the summary of changes a bit and have an idea of what is in there, but I'll try and give some brief explanations of that summary of changes document. And then if there are just any kind of clarifying questions, something that people are confused about or just need a bit of help with understanding, we'll have a few minutes for those type of questions before we go into breakout rooms. And in those rooms, we'll ask you to talk together about what are your significant comments, questions, concerns, affirmations, suggestions that you might have for the changes that we have in this draft. We'll ask that, we'll make sure someone is note-taking in each of those groups so that those notes can come back to our committee so we can look those over later. And then we'd ask you to appoint a person from your group who will share your comments and questions, and we come back as a large group. And then in the large group, we'll just go through the groups, what kind of comments and questions you have. We'll go through the groups, and if your group just has all the same comments and questions, then you can just affirm that you had the same ones and anything new that your group had. And so we hope that we get all the way through the Constitution with this, but we realize that some things might require more discussion than others. And so if we don't get through everything tonight, at the next time that we gather together, we'll continue this discussion. So this is just the first part of our conversation here. So I'll share my screen so that you guys can see where I'm at in the summary of changes. And of course, now that I've done this, everyone has disappeared from my screen. So let me just bring you all back in case people are trying to get my attention. All right. So the first section that we're going to go through is Articles 3, 5, 6, which are in the draft version, and the old Article 14. And so we've lumped those together as being connected to conference responsibilities. And so I'll just pull up. So Article 3 talks about membership. The things that have been added here are largely connected to the suggestions from CCMBC so that we are what we have fits in line with them. There's a few just things that we added, like at the beginning under 3.1, you'll see we just added a definition of congregation so that that's clear in the rest of the document. There's a significant addition in the section 3.4, which is other membership matters. So this is helping just give information and guidance to how we treat these various matters that are listed here, and give some guidance for that. And then also just talks a little bit, there's another new section 3.6 that looks at how our churches are members of the Canadian Conference and the Manitoba Conference, and details that relationship. So those are kind of the main changes in Article 3. Then moving on to Article 5, this is titled Conference Responsibilities. And what we have done here is updated these to indicate the way that we're aligning our conference responsibilities with the new CUSP presented by CCMBC. So the categories that you'll see under responsibilities here are spiritual health and theology, leadership development, mission and organizational health. And so we've given a few given additional information under each of those headings about what that means. What I want to point out, I'll just say section 5.2 got deleted because it was kind of redundant. It just listed CCMBC as our sister organization, which is already detailed elsewhere. I want to highlight the mission responsibility that is in this article. So this is connected to the old Article 14, which there's more information on if you scroll lower down on this summary of changes document. And basically what that old Article 14, we're suggesting that it is removed. And that is the Missions and Church Extension Committee. This doesn't mean that Missions and Church Extension is removed from the conference or as a responsibility and a value of the conference, but instead it highlights that this responsibility falls here in Article 5 under the conference responsibilities. And so as we move forward, MBCM might form teams or committees to help work at that. However, those teams and committees would exist because of this point in 5.1 under conference responsibilities. And so the additional article specifically about missions and church extension isn't needed because it would be covered in Article 5 over here under conference responsibilities. And so we just wanted to highlight that while we're suggesting the removal of the old Article 14, we're not suggesting the removal of missions and church extension in our conference. It has just moved to another place. And then Article 6 is about our assembly, our gathering that we have. And we've just added a few things, again, based off of the recommendations from the CCMBC checklist that we were working off of. And so just clarifies a few things about the purpose of assembly and changes or clarifies some rules around voting to be in conformity with the CCMBC bylaws as well. And so those are the significant changes for this first section of Articles 3, 5, 6, and the old 14. So before we go into breakout rooms, we'll ask you to just discuss some of your thoughts, or if there are any questions or comments that you would like to share with us. I just want to make sure that this is clear, that there's not any points of confusion. Of course, if you have a significant comment, that's something we can perhaps save for the group discussion after the breakouts. But just if there's any points of clarification that we can make before we move into breakout rooms, you can do that now.
Hi, Dawn Fraze from Community Fellowship Church. Just a clarification on congregations, or 6.2, congregations in good standing. What is good standing?
So I believe that would refer to, so if you go up, let me scroll up a little bit here in Article 3 under membership. Of course, it's not going to be specifically detailed, but we talk about there's membership matters that would talk about the state of the church within the conference. So I think in good standing would just be that there aren't any of those issues present. But perhaps Cam maybe could speak a little bit more to clarifying that statement.
Sorry, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Kelsey did well there. Article 3. So in the new document, there is actually a section that does articulate in the membership standings, gives some more detail there. And so there is, I think it's under section 3, number 2, that there is a place there where the Manitoba Conference could place a church into like a suspended or a considered not in good standing if there's something that they're let's say working through, or a situation that is needing some attention. And so that's it's new in that it's specifically stated, but it is actually referenced in the old articles as well, just not stated with that phrasing.
Yeah, I'll add to Cam. I looked up here the new Constitution, Article 3.1 is called investigation, and it details things that would cause a church to go into investigation, which therefore would make them not in good standing. So that would kind of be the definition that we're working with there. Are there any other clarifying questions that anyone wants to ask before we move to the breakout rooms?
Cheryl here. Yeah, I have a question, and it's this. I see lots of reference to CCMBC, so I'm wondering, like, are all provincial conferences constitutions now much the same? Like, is there a template that CCMBC is putting out, and then that MBCM has less leverage, I suppose, in writing its own constitution than used to be the case? Or just what's the relative relationship, and what's the relative change from the past?
Yeah, I think Cam could speak to that, and Marvin also did a lot of the work going over the CCMB checklist, so he might have something to add as well to that.
That's correct, Cheryl. We received a 9-page document of provisions that needed to come into our constitution in order to harmonize with CCMBC and with the other provincial constitutions. And so that's the bulk of what this contains, is those provisions.
Yeah, sorry, my other question was, how does this differ from past practices? Like, did they used to be more separate, or is this new to have that level of alignment?
Probably a veteran like Harold Fraze would be better able to answer that, because he's been in Canadian Conference leadership. And so I don't know the extent to which there is divergence among provincial constitutions, but clearly there was a sense at the national level that things needed to be harmonized in order to proceed with our collaborative model.
Yes, Cheryl, a very good question. I can maybe add a little bit. I don't know that it was so much that the provinces were different or in conflict with each other or CCMBC in the past. It was more that we developed our own processes to develop and approve our constitutions, but we didn't give any consideration to what our neighbors were doing. So what we're doing now under the collaborative model, which was approved last June, is as provinces, we're taking things out of there that are common to us so that we don't inadvertently put something in our constitution that might, and I can't think of an example, but that might affect, say, Ontario or Alberta, so that we're trying to, as Marv says, harmonize our language and our processes as much as we can and still keep our provincial autonomy.
Yeah, David, did you have something to add?
I might, a little historical perspective. The Canadian Conference used to be the Northern District of the North American MB Conference. And so it was US centric, right? And until we created our own charter back in 1945 or 54. Dyslexic about those numbers. But anyway, so back then, 70 years ago, we, or more, we then decided that we would become a Canadian entity. But our history was that the whole was regarded as one. So the Canadian Conference was kind of this one unified entity. But of course, as we've developed, each provincial conference has incorporated and developed its own. And I think for a long period of time, we've struggled to figure out how to do national and provincial activity. How do we do it together? How does the national function vis-a-vis the provincial? And I think this is the sort of the latest iteration of the attempts to kind of unify the two levels. And from my experience working in the conference at the Canadian conference level, I guess for the last 30 years, it's the best sort of approach that we've come up with yet, I think. But it does involve more alignment it's inviting, I guess, more alignment from the provinces into the national entity while still keeping provincial identities intact. So.
All right, thanks for those comments, Dave. Unless there is any other things people would like clarified, I'd like to move us into our first breakout rooms. So like I said before, the point of the breakout rooms is just to, in your group, you can just discuss comments, questions or concerns that you might have about the proposed changes, anything that you want to make sure is heard by MBCM and by our committee who's working on this. And so I'm hoping that Wamba has some breakout rooms ready to go. We'll spend about we'll take 7 minutes for this first breakout room, and afterwards you can let us know if that was too long or too short, and we can make adjustments for the other ones. So yeah, just as a group, discuss what it is you want to bring to us, and I think we'll try and have a person from each from our committee in each breakout room. So us committee members will take notes on what we're hearing. So we'll be the note takers, and then, like I said, make sure to have somebody ready to be the spokesperson for your group when we come back to the large group. So All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you got to have some good conversations in your groups. I think perhaps, well, when your spokesperson shares, perhaps you can say how 7 minutes felt, or if you would have liked more time, so that we know what to do for the next breakout room. So how about we'll start with the group that I was a part of. And so I know that Ed had a question. So I'll get him to start off.
Yeah, thank you, Kelsey. My question was in regard to bylaw. There's a reference to bylaws in Article 3. And when I did the pre-meeting review, I noticed there's quite a few references to bylaws throughout the document. There's somewhere along, I don't know exactly where, one section where it says that the MBCM may institute bylaws. There does not seem to be a mandate. And my initial question was, does MBCM currently have bylaws or not? And are they to be developed or not? And so that was my question.
Yes, and I was hoping that Marvin maybe might have a bit of something to add to that, seeing as you went over a lot of that document, Marvin.
If there are bylaws, I haven't seen them. We have a model of constitution that a lot of organizations have abandoned. The church of which I'm a part switched from a constitution of 30 or some odd pages to one of 6 pages 9 or 10 years ago, and put everything else in bylaws. And we're not there. And this committee didn't try to do that because we had enough work on our hands already. So we just stuck everything into the Constitution.
No, that's fine. This is I mentioned in the breakout room, this is looks like a very good constitution.
All right. I guess I'm not totally clear on who was in the groups. Whoever was in Marvin's group, let's go with them next.
2 major questions that came up in our conversation. One was, this reads as a shift from how we are a body together and more about right thinking. Does this make sense as far as the spirit of where this is going? That's the first question. Changing from being a breathing body together to thinking right. And the second was a reference to the provision in Article 3 that says a congregation may not be a member of any other denomination. The question was, is there a grandfather clause for congregations that are currently part of 2 denominations?
Okay. Well, maybe that one about membership, Marvin, that's the section that you worked on. So perhaps you'd like to answer your own question there.
I put into the Constitution provisions that I received. I didn't craft them. I don't think I'm competent to answer this question.
I think if I may, that question came up in our group as well. And that's something that we didn't address yet as this Constitution Committee. And so it's probably a question that comes up as to what is the way forward. Because I think this is speaking to as new members or as new congregations join, we'd need to specifically address a clause that does allow a grandfather in if that's what we're choosing to do. But that's an important point.
On the other question, I'll admit that it was mine, and it was actually a reference to a particular box. There's a whole bunch of 5.1s here. So the second 5.1, I was looking at the old one on resourcing congregations, and then the new one on spiritual health and theology. And my sense was that the old one read more like a body of the church, and the third one seemed more like intellectual assent to beliefs. And just wondering if there's been a working through of of that kind of shift theologically?
Yeah, that section, 5.1 was something that Cam worked on. So I don't know, Cam, if you would have a bit of a response to that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think what we were working for there in that particular section wasn't necessarily an intentional switch at what you're referring to, but certainly trying to incorporate the collaborative models categories. And so in the earlier piece, there was there was the 3 categories. I don't have that one right in front of me. Well, initiating mission, developing leaders, resourcing congregations. And so part of the switch was to incorporate the 4 priority areas that have become the collaborative model. And so that's was really the significant switch there. Yeah, I hear what you're sensing there, and I guess that would be partly reflected out of that model, but that's where that's coming from, if that's helpful.
All right. The next group will do, well, Cam, you already shared one comment from your group, so why don't we go to whoever was in Cam's group, if there's any comments from there to share.
Well, maybe I could just, so that was brought out, there's a couple of places at which it talks within the membership piece that were just pointed out. One, this is section 4, 1B and 2D, both of them speaking to the other denominations. And so are those redundant? Are they repetitive there? And on also the grandfathering in question in regards to if a church does belong to 2 different denominations. The other question that was brought up was in section 4, number 9. They pointed out, the team here pointed out that the second last sentence, which reads, "The congregation's governing documents shall be used to determine the number of members in the church." And so at first we were excited that you could just write in the number of members that you have, but the sentence itself needs some further clarification as to maybe what it feels a little incomplete or needs some rounding out there. So maybe others from the team can maybe even speak to that.
Yeah, that's some good comments there on number 9. Do you remember, Marvin? Was that wording from CCMBC the way that it was in 3.9, or was that in the from the old constitution?
Sorry, which section are we at?
Article 3, section 9. I think that's new from CCMBC, that you would have added that in. From
An awful lot of Article 3 is brand new, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, on that one, I'll say that's a good comment for our committee to take away, to take a closer look at the wording on that one. Then I think the last group is the group that David was a part of. So I don't know, David, if you're speaking or if someone else from your group will be sharing. Are you speaking, David? Because you're muted.
Thank you. Yep, sorry. Yeah, we had one question, and that is a broader one, and that is there going to be guidance for local churches who are developing or adjusting their constitutions like CCMBC did for MBCM? Churches might want or need to look at their constitutions in some areas that show their membership, like that their membership is part of MBCM and CCMBC, and also alignment with the Confession of Faith. So there might be some work that we as a board, or maybe we as the committee, could do to assist in congregations in that alignment scenario with MBCM and CCMBC. That was the one comment that came forward.
All right, that's our committee will take that comment. That is a good comment there. All right, well, thank you all for sharing on those articles, and of course, if there's comments that were missed or you'd like to add later, you can always contact us to share those. We're happy to hear them. So we'll move on to the next grouping, which is Articles 2, 12, and the old Article 15. Before I get started on there, I just want to check, how did people feel about the 7 minutes? Was that okay? Do you want a little more time? I'm looking at the time, and I think we might not quite make it all the way through tonight, which is fine. We don't want to rush things either, so I want to give adequate time. But just a sense, does anyone have a strong comment on if they'd like to see more than 7 minutes in the breakout room? I'm not seeing anything, so we'll stick with the 7 minutes then when we go to the breakout room. So this next section of Articles 2, 12, and the old 15 is connected to the Confession of Faith and the Provincial Faith and Life team. Let me just share my screen again here with everyone. So these are, we put them together because they are quite connected. So there aren't any significant changes to Article 2. There's a small change just reflecting that sometimes the Confession of Faith gets amended. An example is updates to the baptism articles that have happened recently. So just acknowledging that in our Constitution. And then also now under Article 2, we make a reference to the existence of the Provincial Faith and Life team and how it works together with the National Faith and Life team. And then also there's at the recommendation of CCMBC, a comment about churches accepting the guidance and rulings of the Faith and Life teams as it relates to practicing the Confession of Faith. And so that is a significant changes for Article 2, which very much connects to the next Article 12 further down, which is about the Provincial Faith and Life team. This is a completely new article, and so it outlines the purpose, duties, and responsibilities of the Provincial Faith and Life team. There are a few things in this article, like that used to be in separate articles. So we make reference to the old Article 15, which was the Conflict Resolution Committee. So those responsibilities from that committee have been moved to the Provincial Faith and Life team. So that is no longer, there's no longer Article 15 because it's included in the Provincial Faith and Life team. And so you'll see there, yeah, there's quite a bit of information that you can look at. That is, it's all new in Article 12 that talks about the duties of the Provincial Faith and Life team, as well as how it's organized. And so there is a significant amount of information there. And so you might have some questions or comments from that. Part of this was put together by the Provincial Faith and Life team. I don't I'm not aware that there is anyone from PFLT on this meeting right now. Is that correct? So there may be some questions that we have that we'll have to reach out to PFLT to know some of what went behind the work that they did into explaining their organization and duties, but hopefully we can answer some of those questions as well. So before we go into breakout rooms, just again to check if there are any questions of clarification that anyone would like to ask before you go into your groups to discuss your thoughts on the proposed changes and the proposed new article about the PFLT. All right, I don't see any questions, so I think we can go into our breakout rooms again. So Wamba, you can send us to our groups. All right, welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good discussion in your groups. We'll start with room 1, which had Cam, which is Cam's group. So any comments you guys would like to share on this?
Just a bit of discussion and comments. Mostly just discussion, I would say, in regards to it was commented on that the specifics in regards to listing provincial faith and life team as well as the national faith and life team as it relates to matters relating to the confession of faith, for example. Just noting that there's this built-in collaboration, that there will be both provincial faith and life working with local church, but also a recognition that it's beyond us, as well as we choose to collaborate with national faith and life team. But there wasn't really questions, just kind of discussion kind of based around there.
All right, thanks, Cam. Room 2, I believe, is my group. So there was one question which I don't know, Cam, if you would have an answer for this, but just about the composition of the group that's listed in 2.1 and then number 3, I think would be where it's the director of church ministries, no less than 3 credentialed leaders and up to 2 non-credentialed members. The question was just if this changes anything about what the numbers are for, like, have been for who's on the PFLT. Is this just saying what has been, or is this a change?
That's a good question. So one of the things, like for the old and new document, the provincial faith and life team itself is actually a new team. And so in the old document, there was some similar committees in regards to credentialing orientation, or there was the conflict resolution teams, but this is actually, in a sense, a new team. So it is a new response that way, but maybe others on the Constitution team here have a response to that.
The other question around the PFLT was just wondering, it mentioned credentialed leaders, typically people who are credentialed are pastors. Just wondering if people in our conference, as just a member of a church, are able to get credentialed just because they want to serve on like a group like this.
I believe that's normally been reserved to those that are in specifically in church pastoral leadership. There's some exceptions along the way if they're in other ministry leadership positions. So I don't know that it's been outside of those settings, though, that's been available.
Okay, I think part of in that question was just sort of wondering, like, that means that only pastors can be on voting members of PFLT, and so there's maybe some questions about how that fits, or what that looks like, that it's only pastors. So I think that's a good question for some discussion going forward. And then there's also a question in our group about the appointments of the PFLT members, and I'll just ask Abe to speak a little bit to some of the sort of the tensions that he saw in what that looks like in the Constitution.
Yeah, thanks, Kelsey. I guess my it's a comment and then a question. In the past, I seem to recall that there was more input from the assembly in regards to faith and life team members, whereas now it looks like it's the board decides who's going to be on there. And not that I don't trust the board, I'm just saying that it puts an awful lot of responsibility on the board with very little input from the assembly. And once the board has recommended someone for the assembly, pretty 99.9% of the time, the assembly is going to agree with the board, and maybe takes a little bit of that input out of the assembly, and gives a little more autonomy to the board on that issue. That I'm just, wondering if that's a little bit too much a responsibility for the leadership board.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone else on the committee would have some comments to that. I'm not sure, Cam, if you have something, or David as the board representative, if you would have any comments or response to that.
I might have a response, but it's actually the report from my group, which was precisely the same thing. So there was a question, maybe slightly worded differently than Abe, but so we're saying that the PFLT has its authority from the leadership board. You go into that Article 12, and then as such, we're giving the board the authority over the over the PFLT. Historically, in Mennonite Brethren world, the Faith and Life group has always had a kind of stance a little off the center of the leadership channel that allows it to speak into processes and decisions and whatever, even to the executive board or the leadership board or the whatever. We tried to do that in the last restructuring of the Canadian conference back in 2004, just because it was reflecting things like the old it used to be called the Board of Reference and Council, and it was council, and it was speaking into the way we worked as a body, and maybe reflected a little bit like Cheryl was suggesting, where's the body life in this thing, or is it all technical and theological? So we raised exactly that same question.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's yes, that's a good comments, and I appreciate those. And I think that's something good for perhaps our committee to talk about, to bring to PFLT as well on what they as they put this together. But really appreciate people's comments there. Did you have anything else from your group, David, to share?
Just one technical, and that is on Article 9, Section 2, number 4, we still say Finance and Audit Committee. That note, it's just a typo, or it's a typing correction at this time.
All right, and I think the last group is Marvin's group.
Yeah, we have very smart people here tonight, and a bunch of them were in my group. They caught another typo that our whole team missed, and that is in 12.2. It says under number 1 that the PFLT will oversee the spiritual health of the Mennonite Conference, and that probably should say Mennonite Brethren Conference. Awesome. So that was one, but there were 2 questions. One was, could this Provincial Faith and Life Task Force or team be overworked? So that's one question. And the second is this Faith and Life team there to open the scriptures mainly, or to deal with conflict? The sense from reading the document is that it's more there to deal with conflict than it is to open the scriptures to us and to talk about what the confession of faith means. I'll stop there. Otherwise, I'd be repeating myself. Cheryl, did you want to add something to that? No? All right.
All right, well, thank you from Marvin's group for those. I think those are some good questions and comments, perhaps not answerable quite in this moment, but as we mentioned, this is a new article and it hasn't been written down in this way, what the the purpose and functionality of the PFLT is. And so it's really good to hear this feedback from you, because this is brand new, and I think there's some perhaps relational aspects here that maybe this is a little bit technical, and some good reminders there. So just really appreciate that, and I think we'll take a look at that and see what might need to change, and perhaps there needs to be some more conversation and discussion at a future date about what the role of the PFLT is in our conference, and that's certainly an important thing to make sure that we give appropriate time to that as we move forward on that. All right, I think maybe perhaps we'll make it through this draft here this evening. So moving on to the next section of articles, this includes articles 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, and then the old 12, 17, and 18. So there's a lot in here, but hopefully I think a lot of it very much fits together with some of the changes that are being made. So hopefully this doesn't take us too long to go through. Let me share my screen again here. Sorry, this mouse is backwards from my normal mouse, and so I keep going the wrong way as I scroll, and I know it every time, but let me find my way up to Article 8 over here. All right, so this grouping of articles is a lot about just the structure and functionality of our conference. So some of the changes that you'll see here in Article 8 just reflects that some of the committees that we have shifted to being more ad hoc committees than standing committees. And the reasoning for a lot of that being is finding people to be on standing committees. A lot of these committees, like the Constitution Committee, just didn't operate for a very long time, which is why a group of us got put together to go over this this work. And so yeah, that just the changes to Article 8 just have to do with how ad hoc committees get put together. Article 9 is the organization of our conference, and so this article lists all the committees and groups that we have as a conference. And so there are some changes there that are based on some of these other discussions that we've been having. So for example, we've deleted the conflict resolution committee off of that list because those responsibilities are now part of the PFLT instead. And so similarly, the nominating committee now, it operates as an ad hoc committee underneath the responsibility of the conference secretary. So instead of being a committee, that responsibility is detailed elsewhere under the duties of the secretary. And so there's some of the committees that we have there stay the same, and some of them change, and those reasons are described. Their credentialing committee also moves to the responsibilities of PFLT. And we talked about missions and church extension already, and conflict resolution is with PFLT. Personnel gets shifted the responsibility to assistant moderator to form an ad hoc committee rather than a standing committee. And Constitution Committee also goes underneath the conference secretary with the ability to make an ad hoc committee. And so those are just some changes there that are listed in Article 9. So they're changed, but it's other articles that reflect those changes more fully. And then as you'll note, There are some which are maybe painfully obvious that they need to be updated, like the board of Concord College or being a member of Family Life Network. Some outdated names there, but is some further work that needs to be done to make sure we accurately reflect those relationships and how they need to be detailed in our Constitution. And so that's something that will be done at a later date. So we don't have any changes suggested for the time being for those ones. Article 10 looks at the leadership board. So there's a few changes in staff title. There is one of the changes. And as well, you'll see there's a few structural things about the collaborative model there in 10.2.9. And so that is about the organization and the duties of our leadership board. Then Article 11 takes a look at the terms of duties of executive officers. So again, here, assistant moderator is clarifying that that they put together a personnel committee as needed, and they're responsible for those personnel committee things and putting that together. So they have the ability to create a committee, but it's ad hoc, not a standing committee. And same with secretary, like I mentioned earlier, up in Article 9, is now responsible for nominating, and the Constitution committee. There's an article there that is deleted, and that was actually a question that I'm not sure if Cam and David were able to have a conversation about that old Article 12 to add some clarity to our discussion there. But I think it was somewhat, it had some old structural pieces, and some of it I believe was a little bit more belonged in a governance manual, perhaps more so than a constitution. But later on, if Cam and David want to add any clarity in our discussion later, they can do that. Then we already did 12. So 13, the finance committee. There's a few things changed to better clarify how that the finance committee operates. And then 17 and 18, the old 17 and 18 are removed. Personnel committee, Constitution committee, we already discussed that those responsibilities shifted to executive members of the board. And so those articles aren't necessary because those duties are detailed elsewhere. So that is a brief summary of the changes there. And so are there any questions for clarification that anyone has before we move into our breakout rooms again?
Maybe just a quick comment about that number 12 that we removed on the staff team. That was reflecting an old era when there were a number of different boards elected and each board selected its own staff. And we needed to have some kind of a constitutional arrangement whereby all the staff work together. But that's not the way it is anymore. There's no separate boards. There's just the leadership board and the PFLT. So we did not believe that we needed that kind of complex structure anymore, or article towards that complex structure anymore.
Great, thank you, David. I'm not seeing any other questions here, so I think we can move into our breakout rooms. Yeah, we'll do another 7 minutes, and that'll get us pretty close to the end of our time, but hopefully we can get through people's questions afterwards before we close out as well. So Wamba, you can send us to our breakout rooms. All right, welcome back, everyone. I do see that we have 5 minutes left on our scheduled time, so we will just quickly try and hear, perhaps we might just more hear the comments and questions from the groups, and then we'll be at our time. But glad we can make it all the way through the Constitution. So I'll start with Cam, your group.
Yes, actually, one of the comments that was brought up was in regards to Article 8, Section 1, eligibility for office, and there was comments that were shared in regards to number 3. So it says a conference employee leaving employment shall not be eligible to serve on the board for a 3-year period. And there was question here in regards to whether that should also include spouse of employee during that time as well. Just wondering how, the new employee, how that may affect, and interact there. So that was a comment given.
Okay, thanks. That's a good question. And I assume you took a note of that, Cam. So thank you.
Yep.
David, from your group.
We did not have any questions or comments that would affect this thing.
All right, thank you. And then Marvin's groups got combined there. So Marvin, if you want to share for ours your notes.
Thank you. A question. MBCM staff is smaller than it used to be. Has there been a careful eye to what we expect of them? And is this healthy for what is going on? And related to that, the second part to the question, the load on people generally is great. It's harder to get people to serve. Is this going to work? Or the structure that we're adopting? That's the question.
Yes, thank you. Good questions and important things to consider. And as we discussed in our group, everyone knows that churches never have too many volunteers, and same with the conference as well. And so important things though to be aware of and ask ourselves about, and make sure that we are recognizing the context that we're in that way in how we structure ourselves. So really appreciate those comments, and they're very important for us to consider. All right, we are pretty much at the end of our time. So I just want to thank you all for your comments and participation here. This is really helpful to hear this and good for us to get some feedback as a committee. And as I said at the beginning, if there are further comments or questions that come to you that you want to make sure that we are aware of, please let us know. We do want to hear from you. Yes.
Sorry, I'll just add there, maybe Wamba can put it in, Wamba did put it in the chat already. The email address best to use for this is info@mbcm.ca. And if you simply put subject line Constitution, we will make sure that all of that info gets compiled and into the right hands as well. So info@mbcm.ca. We welcome your questions, comments, and certainly feel free to reach out as well to myself if that's helpful. I can either guide you to the team or whatever's helpful there. But yeah, so the other thing maybe I'll mention is November 13 is the Council of Representatives meeting, and we will have time during that meeting as well, where we can again go over this document so that we make sure that this keeps getting adjusted and listened to, and these conversations keep happening. So.
All right, well, that is all that I have. And again, just thank you to those of you who came. Really appreciate it. So I don't know if you have any closing comments, Cam, before we end.
No, just I echo that. Thank you so much. And thanks to this team. They've been fantastic to work with, and really appreciate their work. So thanks so much. Have a good rest of the evening. And again, welcome your ongoing comments and suggestions along the way as well. So have a great night.